What's going on, people, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be reviewing a friend's logo, taking a look at some of the issues he has with legibility and scalability and seeing what we can do to fix it. So pretty much I got a message off my friend the other day who's a coder, who's also a freelancer like myself, and he asked if I wouldn't mind taking a look at his logo, reviewing it and giving him some thoughts on what I would do differently. Realistically, there isn't much that I'd change with the logo if I'd have worked on it myself, so I don't want to take a dig at the designer who worked on it. That's not the purposes behind this video, and the logo itself is very well made. It's just when it comes to the type that's being used and the type of fonts that are being used, that's really where the issues reside. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to hop over to his website. We're going to check out his logo and how it looks on the site. And then you'll be able to see, hopefully, some of the issues that I saw straight away, which were glaringly obvious. And then we'll jump into Illustrator, try and fix up some of those issues and see if we can do a little bit of a comparison so you can see the difference at the end. So we're on Matt's website now. We've got Zeus in the background keeping us company. But yeah, essentially, you might not be able to notice it straight away, but it's the logo that's on the navigation bar. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page as well, you'll notice it's even worse here as well. I wouldn't have this logo here, for example, which is why it's important to have different variations of your logo. For instances like this, where having text in there is just not worth it because it's not a big enough space. It's just too thin. The weight that's being used on the fonts is way too thin for a logo that's at this size. And it's one thing to bear in mind for your navigation menu is that if you are using a logo that's stacked, where you've got the icon at the top and then some text underneath, and you've got a reasonable amount of text to work with, that you need to make sure that either it's at a good size, where if the weight is slightly thinner, you're still going to be able to see everything, or if the type is actually quite small, then you need to make sure that it's compensated with a thicker type. I'd also consider using maybe a different version of the logo for the navigation menu. I'm not a massive fan of using stacked logos, which is what I would describe as an icon at the top, then text underneath for a navigation menu, because you've got less space to work with vertically, but what you have got to play around with is the space horizontally. So that's where I would use a horizontal logo. So having your logo marked to the left, type to the right, and then that would mean that you've got more space to work with, which means that you can have bigger type, get away with using maybe a thinner weight if you prefer that. And if you use a bolder weight, of course, it's going to look even better. What I would do differently for the footer is I would get rid of this version and I'll just use an icon instead of having an icon and a type, because as you can see, you can't even read the text, so it's not worth it being there. So those are the things that I'll do differently. Let's jump into Illustrator. We'll chop and change the logo and see what we can play around with in terms of creating, something which is going to be better for legibility. And then we'll do a quick comparison at the end and see what you guys think. Right, so we've got Matt's logo here. I don't actually know what font's being used because the font that was used originally has been converted to an object, so I can't actually edit it. What I do know, however, is that Matt uses Lato on his website, so we're going to use that. And I think Lato does a good job of replicating whatever font this is that's being used. So we've got Matthew James, a web developer. I'm going to change this to white quickly so that we can see it a little bit better. Then I'm going to make them black. Well, not black italic, I don't want them to be italic. So Matthew James, we want really bold. And then web developer, what I try to do to add a bit of contrast between everything is I'll go a couple of weights below whatever the primary text is. So in this instance, it's black. So I'm thinking maybe either semi-bold or regular. The regular on Lato isn't too thin, which is really nice because you'll notice like the main issue with the previous logo is the thinness of the web developer section. Next thing, we're going to play around with the spacing because there's quite a bit of padding between the letters. So I'm just going to increase the spacing between the characters and see if we can create something similar to what we've shown before. I'm going to put it at maybe 160. That's close. I don't want a massive amount of space in between everything, but we want to get it as close as possible. And then for this, maybe we should put it at 220, something like that, see how that looks. I want the spacing of the web developer to be much larger in comparison, so maybe 220 won't be enough. Let's put that up to 240. So let's grab everything, convert them to a object, and then what we can do is we can copy the width from Matthew James, paste it in for the web developer, centralize the two, and then we've got this justified effect, which is what's going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the O, I'm going to copy the height from this,
and I'm going to create a square with the same dimensions. And then what that will let us do is create some consistency with the spacing across the whole logo. So for the gap between the two portions of text, I'm going to use this distance. I'm going to drag this text up. What I might do is just quickly make a copy of this and reduce the size of it. And let's divide it by 4, and then we can use this little block again if we ever need to make any minor adjustments. So if I just add this to the bottom of this square, then we can figure out the spacing for everything. So drag that up. There we go. And if we move this out of the way, then we can kind of compare it to the previous logo. That looks okay, to be honest. I think there's enough breathing room between everything. It looks nice and balanced. And when we zoom out, everything is clear and concise. Right, so that's all good. What we're going to do is we're going to take the logo mark, and I'm going to show you a technique that I learned from Made by James. A lot of you will probably know who this guy is if you're a designer or a logo designer, and if you don't, go and check out his work because he's really amazing at what he does. But basically, what he's shown in an Instagram post is if you're ever wanting to know how big to make your logo marks when you're working on stacked versions of logos, make a couple of copies of them. So I'm going to make a couple of copies of this, and then I'm going to highlight them all, and then make sure that they're the same width as the type. And then when I do that, you'll notice it creates quite a nice balanced size for us. So I think that's okay. What I might do is just increase the size a little bit. So I'll bring these back, and I'm just going to reduce the size of this last logo mark so we can make it a little bit bigger. And if I highlight everything again, make sure it's the same width as the type, just by using the smart guides, which I'm so glad that Adobe used smart guides. It's so helpful. And then if we take everything, centralize it, we can already see that this is really nice and balanced. And what we can do now is we can use these squares that we used before to determine what the size should be between the text and the logo mark. We want to make sure that this is exaggerated because we don't want it to be too close to the type. We want the type to be its own entity, and we want the logo mark to be its own entity as well. So I'm going to use a couple of squares, and then I'm going to use this little one to determine the size, and that should hopefully be enough space in between everything. So if I just zoom out now, I take these objects and bring them over, you can see there's a lot of breathing room between everything. If I zoom out, you can see again, everything's its own entity, which is what we're trying to achieve here. Next thing, we've got the logo mark, we've got a stacked version of the logo. One thing that I wanted to try out is if I just make a copy of this quickly and I just play around with the type, I thought what might be nicer to try out, instead of having this text aligned completely, if I try and make the web developer section, so if I just make a ruler so I know where this sits, and then I just want to make it a little bit smaller compared to the Matthew James. So if I bring it in a bit, I'm hoping that that adds to the composition by doing that. Might not do, we'll try it out and see what we kind of come up with. But it's just something that I thought of doing. It might not look as good. It might look better. Let's see. So it just starts taking more of a shape. A lot of the time when you're doing text and things like that, sometimes it can look better when it's justified. But if you can add a bit more shape to it, I feel like it adds more character to the composition. So that's the stacked version. What we're gonna do though, is we're gonna take this and we're gonna create a horizontal version from it. So that's one thing that Matt doesn't have at the moment. So let's bring this stacked version over to the side for the moment, and we're gonna start creating a horizontal version. And I think in this case, a justified text layout would be better. Sizing of everything. I got rid of that square, didn't I, like an idiot? Let's bring that back in because we're gonna need that. So the thing with this logo mark is it comes away from the M a little bit at the top. So you'll notice when I centralize everything, it doesn't look optically right. So let me just group everything because it's gonna sandwich all the text. We don't wanna do that. So when I drag this off to the left, you'll notice I've centralized everything using the align tool, but it looks off. You gotta look at things optically sometimes. And when a logo's like this, where you've got a section which is going above something else, like a different element, that can affect the balance of things. Quick workaround to do that is just by taking the size of the M. So I can do that by using a rectangle, mapping that out, centralizing the rectangle with the type, and then bringing this down, snapping it to the bottom of the object, getting rid of that, and you notice already that looks more center, which is perfect. What we want to do is probably play around with the spacing a little bit, because I'm not happy with the size of the logo mark here. I think it looks massive in comparison to the type. Bring this to the bottom of the text. And then if I reduce the size of the mark now, that should be a little better. And then we go in and we create, don't want to make it circle. Go in and we do the center again. So bring this down, center that with the type, bring it down again so it's locked in place. And then if we just bring this a little bit closer, I would have everything perfectly aligned with the text, but I don't think it will look right, to be honest. We can test that theory. So I'll just bring that off to the side and I reduce the size so it's aligned with the bottom. Yeah, something looks a bit off optically. So I think by having the logo mark just a little bit bigger, it adds to the composition in that sense. It doesn't look off. Now, the spacing between the logo mark and the type, very important. What should we do with this? I think we should use this square again and maybe use this little one just to create some consistent spacing across all of the different types of logos, seeing how this looks. If we zoom out, I think that looks great. There's enough space in between everything. Let's group that together. Let's get rid of these blocks and let's make some new artboard. I can't find the artboard tool. What's wrong with me? Take this one, make sure that it's square to start off with. I'm going to take this and make sure that it's the same size. I want to show you what the logo looks on the background, because this is a color that Matt uses across his branding, which is really nice. So let's group this, bring this in, centralize it, and just reduce the size just a tad. And you can already see that looks amazing. Really loving that. If we make a copy of it and bring this other logo in place, just so I can compare the two. Drag that in, bring it to the front and reduce the size again. There we go. And you can already see the difference in the two. The web developer is much more visible. I think we fixed the issue. Right, let's make a copy of this and we're going to sort out the horizontal one. Let's just make the actual artboard a little bit wider as it's horizontal. Then we're going to bring this over, then drag that logo in. So here we go. Let's see how this looks on the blue background. I think it's already looking really nice. There we go. Reduce the size of this as well. I drag this away just so we can compare everything again. You can see we've improved the legibility. We've made him a nice new horizontal logo. And I think, to be honest, I'd consider maybe using this on the navigation menu. But if he didn't want to and he still wanted to use a stacked version, then I think this would work perfectly well as well. I think we've done a good job here. I know I'm a bit biased, seeing as I've put it together myself, but I think we've improved the legibility. It's a small size now, we can still see everything. If we zoom out, we can still see everything compared to the other one where it really is hard to see. And at 33%, it's not going to be that size. It's going to be a little bit bigger. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments if you want me to review your logo in an upcoming video. If you want some general feedback or you want me to make some adjustments for you, let me know in the comments. Drop me an email or drop me a message. I'll be more than happy to take a look. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like this in the future. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.